Okay, maybe we call the Health and Human Services Committee meeting to order. Brian Foley may not be here till about 6 o'clock, but we have a quorum, so we can get started. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes of October 13th.
So,
Now you got to move.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay, great. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. Tonight, you do see on the agenda that we will be opening a public hearing tonight to allow the public to be heard in regards to the shared services plan that was presented at our October 26th legislative meeting. There were a number of proposals on the shared services. I think there were 12 of them altogether. Next, he has the slide presentation, but if the public wants to be heard, there is a call-in number that is 315-294-8051. If anyone wants to speak on our shared services projects. Tonight, we don't have a huge resolution agenda, but we do have a presentation. And, you know, this is, how do you pronounce your last name, Chris?
Trevisani.
Okay, Chris Trevisani from Housing Visions. He's been asked to come here to, oh, do you want to say this? All right, before we get started, Chris, Tim wants to put something on the record.
You know, I've been working with men and women that are treatment for a number of years, and I want to make sure that with the opioid settlement that we actually use some of that money towards treatment. And I'd like to somehow, Madam Chair, before I leave these chambers, that is accomplished, that I can say, geez, I did do something right. So between now and December, I'd like to be able to have part of that money maybe go towards one of the programs that are in place, such as Mixed Ride or one of the other ones. So we have some numbers as to what we think sometimes now and some of the committee meetings and special ledge meetings.
And Rich may know better than I, there are only 2 settlements that we've accepted at this point in time.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
And one of them was 250 to 700,000, and I don't know the total detail of how that will come in. The other I thought was a $1.4 million amount, but that would be paid over 18 years, if I recall. You know, I think to your point, Tim, there will be opportunities when the Healing Community Study implementation dollars are no longer available to support the programming that's in place, and I think that's June of 2022. There will be an opportunity, whether it's Mixed Ride or some of the other programs that the steering committee thinks have had the biggest impact. That, you know, I think there is, I can't speak for the rest of the legislature, but I certainly would support reinvestment of some of those dollars back into prevention.
Well, being up here for a number of years, I know that sometimes that general budget thing, it's like a black hole. It just really goes in there.
Your point is, if we're getting that money for that purpose, reinvested
Yes,
in services.
please, ma'am.
Okay.
I would say to you, Tim, that it's probably the sense of the room that indeed that would be
Well,
the right use of the money.
Yeah, I like to keep at least one campaign promise before I can't say I won't raise your tax. Anyway,
Yeah, right.
Please.
All right. So noted. Thank you.
thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Chris, we're back on. I'm very appreciative to have Chris come here tonight to give kind of an opportunity to go over what might prove to be a real good partnership and an opportunity to address what we've all been hearing about for quite some time now, which is our emergency homeless housing needs in this community and the use of hotel stays to try to meet that need. And I don't know, Trish, if you brought him forward to talk about some community issues, and it kind of morphed into where the highest priority was, and this certainly fell to the highest priority. You've gotten some partners with the city of Auburn also to be listening to this, so This is a wonderful opportunity to bring the committee up to speed and just to give us a flavor of what might be the possibilities on the horizon.
Okay, thank you, and appreciate the opportunity to come and speak tonight. Like you said, yeah, Trish and I met, I want to say it's probably 6 months ago now at this point, looking at various opportunities to improve the housing here in Auburn and the county. Just to give a little background on housing visions and who we are and maybe how our paths crossed is we're a nonprofit housing development company. We started in Syracuse 31 years ago. Our focus is neighborhood revitalization and good quality, affordable, and supportive housing. So over those 31 years, we've done about 1,700 units across New York State. I've highlighted some of the supportive housing projects in your packet. And then one locally here in Auburn. So we did the Orchard Street revitalization back in 2014. That one we did have a strong partner in the city of Auburn. Home headquarters site is also a partner there in the Allen Foundation. So we collaboratively work together and help revitalize that neighborhood there. Most recently on the supportive housing side, we partnered with the Salvation Army to relocate their women's shelter. Their emergency housing was on the south side of Syracuse. It was on the verge of being condemned. It was just in really rough shape. So we partnered with them and we rebuilt them a brand new facility on the west side of Syracuse. But not only did we provide emergency shelter beds, we put 16 on the first floor, but we built the upper 3 floors for permanent supportive housing on the upper floor. So Salvation Army will receive people on the emergency side, give them emergency housing, but they also are there to provide case management services and have people live in the upper floors with support services there 24/7. So we built that 2 years ago now. So that one is a huge success for us in the Salvation Army. Prior to that, we built a project in Syracuse called Van Buren Square. For those of you who don't know, that was a 50-unit homeless veterans project we built in the east side of Syracuse. That one is about 6 or 7 years now in operation. And we're very happy to reduce the homeless veterans population in Syracuse close to critical zero when we open that up. There's just a little bit of background and experience on housing vision. So when we first met and started discussing housing needs here, the notion of homeless veterans was brought up to us. We had experience in that, so we thought maybe that was a good idea. After 2 or 3 meetings that Tricia orchestrated with a lot of people in this room, other representatives from the city of Auburn, we listened and we learned that although veterans housing is important and a need, the much more urgent need was just the homelessness issues here. As you know, the hotels are being overly populated. There's a large amount of subsidies being spent to house them on an emergency basis. So we have had several conversations with the Chapel House on Grand Ave. We looked at their existing property there, have had conversations with the city of Auburn, and we just presented a proposal to the Chapel House Board of Directors late last week, and they have agreed to enter into a purchase contract with us for that property. So right now, our thoughts are to demolish the existing buildings that are there and rebuild a brand new facility containing around 50 emergency shelter beds, and then probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 permanent supportive housing units. We are not at a point where we have any plans or drawings. We wanted to get to that first step to get the Chapel House Board to agree to enter into a contract with us. So our next step would be to kind of secure pre-development dollars to do the initial concept layouts, meet with the city of Auburn, have collaborative design meetings with the Chapel House staff to see how best to accommodate their needs, both long-term, but intermittently. So once we ultimately get funded and start construction, how do we keep their operations going while we demolish their building? build a new one. So those are nuances that we're working out with them now. And then we need a collaborative effort, both locally and at the state level. I've put a schedule of our proposed redevelopment in your packets, the last sheet in there, where I kind of go through a timeline in terms of identifying the process that we're going through and the timeframes associated with it. So what I have is a tentative January 1st and a contract execution date with the Chapel House, and then a 3 to 4 month due diligence process. In that, these are all reports that we would need to do to satisfy the requirements for our funding sources. You see the appraisal, environmental reports, a market study, property survey, soil investigations, because we look to build new buildings on the property. And then some architectural design drawings where we can look at layouts, how they fit with the current zoning in the city of Auburn, and then start the approval process. Hopefully we can get through the approval process, by July 1st of 2022. And the one thing that's unique to this property, and that this is probably the one or only site in the city of Auburn where this use is allowed by right for the zoning. I really don't want to try to reinvent the wheel and put this use somewhere else where it's may not be a good fit. So I think this site is large enough to accommodate what we're trying to do. And then in terms of the funding side, we're really looking for 3 large funding applications. The first one would be through the Homeless Housing Assistance Program, or HHAP. That would fund all of the emergency shelter beds and the furniture associated with the shelter. The second one would be the Chapel House applying for operating subsidy and rental subsidy through the Empire State Supportive Housing Initiative. So we refer to that as ESHI. And that application, again, if it follows suit the last 2 years, that's been in October. So we're assuming another October submission date for ESHI. And then the large one would be the New York State Homes and Community Renewal Consolidating Funding Application. That's where we would apply for the tax credit allocation, housing trust fund, and some other state subsidies to fill the gap of the entire project. We're estimating total costs somewhere around 25 to 30 million to complete all that we're trying to do here. And we will need all of these 3 awards to make that happen. So then, assuming all the awards come through by February of next year, we'll start final design and then close on the property in September of 2023, and then an 18-month construction timeframe, and that's when we would look for Chapel House to have a temporary facility to house their current population, and then we're open to complete construction March 2025 and full occupancy by June.
As I'm listening to you, the current capacity for Grand Ave right now is 16, I mean, I don't know, 18? Okay, so that would go out of commission while you're obviously building, but the total capacity would go from 18 to 50?
50, correct.
Okay. And the city of Auburn has already looked at this property and pretty much said they could expand on it. And
They said the proposed use is allowable. We have not put pen to paper and drew a building on there to say it's compliant. But, once we have an architect under contract, we will work closely with the city and Chapel House staff to make sure the design is in conformance with the standards. And if it's not, if there's any zoning relief that we need, we will ask for it.
they seem to be pretty receptive to
Absolutely.
this idea, the city of Auburn, which is a real plus in my mind. And you need all 3 of these funding streams to make this work, but I feel we have a fairly strong application based on our need. Is that how you see it?
I think so. I think based on the need, based on public participation and there's leveraging, if there's county investment or city investment, those leverage points will make the application score much higher. And at the state level, if there's an HHAP award and an ESHI award, that makes that application score even higher. So there's a reason these applications deadlines are the way they are.
What do you, I'm sorry, just last question. What do you see as the county investment? What phase of this?
I mean, I think if there's an opportunity for some pre-development funding to cover these due diligence items from now to April, you know, that would be considered an investment at the local level that would score very highly in the state level.
Mark and Heidi, you had questions, or Trish? Or Mark?
Go ahead. Thank you, Trish.
I hear you say that the project includes, in addition to the 50 emergency beds, 33 transitional or supportive.
30 supportive, correct.
30.
And those numbers are based on a walkthrough of the site. We had our construction manager there, and then 2 or 3 of our development teams in the housing side. So we kind of felt comfortable we could fit that many units on the site.
This is an exciting update. A lot of things are new to me, hearing from you tonight for the first time. Can you talk a little bit about the emergency housing and what that model looks like of going from emergency to transitional supports and or permanent supportive housing? So right now, a lot of what is happening is our homeless are getting stuck in the hotels for extended periods of time. And I was wondering, with the emergency shelter, will that be short-term housing, or what's the vision there for people to stay within that first tier of emergency
I
housing?
mean, I think the first tier, I think it would be, you know, how the Chapel House wants to administer that. And some of that will be outlined in the ESHI application. And the ESHI application is critical because what that will provide is it will provide the operating dollars for the Chapel House to run the shelter. So if there's increased staff, 24/7 security, all those things will be part of that application. And how the Salvation Army runs our Syracuse development, I think the shelter, they're in there for 30 days, and at that point, they're eligible to move upstairs if they qualify. And at that point, the services will continue. And it's a 1-year lease, it goes good.
Being on the planning board, both city and the county for about 10 years. Grand Ave, that's where you want to place this. It might be zoned correctly, but I mean, if you have a major person who wants to invest, maybe build a factory or whatever. I mean, I work with a lot of people who are in need because of alcohol and drugs. And sometimes that's not the prettiest site, and that would have to be designed so that, you know, like Chapel House right now, I mean, a lot of times they're out front, you know, a lot of neighborhood complaints and that kind of thing. So if it's done correctly, I think it's all right, but I just worry about that being, you know, 32,000 cars go by there every day. How do you handle the image? Or
I was asked that question twice before when we did the Upper Chamberlain House. The neighborhood was very concerned about moving residents homeless.
could you speak up a little bit? My ears are.
Sure. I was saying there were similar concerns when we did the Salvation Army project in Syracuse, because it was more in a neighborhood setting than a highway setting, and they really didn't want to see people congregating inside and outside. And we designed the facility to accommodate those concerns. And over the past 2 years, we've had 0 complaints of those types of issues. Same thing with our veterans project in Syracuse, where there's 50 veterans. We designed the internal circulation, internal vestibules. And again, we have 24/7 folks there monitoring the pedestrian traffic in and around the building.
Are there complaints? I mean, there is a building there.
There's a shelter there now.
Right.
It's on the same lot that the current shelter, so it's just the increasing capacity. of a lot of hotel rooms, which is really expensive.
Well, it might be cost saving, but I just hate to see the, the major artery into the city that everybody says, I'm not gonna invest in Auburn or Cayuga County because of this. Sometimes it's a detriment, but, I mean, if there's a need, I mean, Malone Village, Olympia Housing, they just put in some homeless and all of those, is that taking up any of the?
That's transition.
That's transitional.
That's transitional housing.
Marion.
for
Circle.
I mean, but we have been taking care of our seniors and our disabled and, Lane Estates and all the different projects that we do have in Auburn. Christopher Community runs some of our senior citizen housing. Syracuse, they've done an excellent job over the years. So absolutely, I'm in favor of good quality housing, but I just don't know whether.
And honestly, to me, this is like the first phase because this is not the housing piece. This is meeting the emergency housing need. And getting people then into the short-term transitional with case management so that they can potentially, we still phase two have to decide how we're going to tackle having enough housing for people to afford to live in. But, this is that how you see it? This is the first phase of addressing the fact that we have an obligation to house people that present with an emergency need. And we're likely doing it mostly in a hotel.
Right.
And now there were 90 of them last month at the Health and Human Services
Right, there's
report.
about 55 people in hotels today. 89.
So that would take a huge piece out of, offering another alternative to a costly
Right. hotel. And I think a new facility at the current location will only improve the curb appeal as you drive along Route 5. Whether it's a homeless shelter or market rate housing, I think it's going to look much better. Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You mentioned 3 lines of, funding for this. Can you expand on that just a little bit? And what happens if one does not come to fruition? Are they kind of pretty much guaranteed? How's that work?
Unfortunately, nothing is guaranteed.
Right, that's why I'm asking the question.
Sure. So I can say if one of the 3 were not funded, we're committed to seeing this happen. So we would have an exit interview, find out why it wasn't funded, if it didn't score properly, if there were changes that we needed to make it hit that threshold, we would resubmit that next round. So it may just push the schedule back down, but we'll continue to work on it until we get it funded.
Thank you.
Would you estimate for a county this size versus the work we've done in Onondaga County in the city of Syracuse? Or city this size versus what you've done in this kind of work previously, would be a county commitment that would push up the likelihood, as you said, of meeting the threshold during like a due diligence pre-building phase.
So like maybe asking how much money you think you need.
Yep.
Yeah.
Eligibility.
I would say 250,000 or more is deemed a strong commitment at the state level. We've done other projects where there was a $50,000 commitment, and although that's not insignificant, the state likes to see 25 or $30 million project.
And if I can put Ray on the spot, about how much did we pay in the last calendar year in hotels?
Altogether, though, I'd have to look at the hotel number specifically, but altogether, we're about $1.5 million in homeless housing, majority of it is
One.
hotels.
It's just one.
I'm interested, based upon that money, 250,000 or whatever it is, does it improve the attractiveness of the proposal? As in our case, there's a city and a county, if both the city and the county contribute some amount of money, does that increase the attractiveness, or does that really not matter? As long as you contribute sufficient money to meet a certain threshold.
I think if there were investment from both the city and the county, it would increase the attractiveness.
Thank you.
Certainly.
So Chris, is it accurate to say that the initial investment on the part of the county and the city helps with the sort of the legwork and the projections that you need to put together to be able to make the application for, for HHAP, ESHI, and the other one, and that also that can be reimbursable in terms of allocating the, putting that in the application to reimburse the entities?
Correct. Right. Once we get to construction loan closing, that $250,000 will pay back.
So if the county makes an investment to help with the pre-design costs, those costs would be recouped if they're, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it would be a pre-development loan that we would pay back. I think that shows a true partnership
Yeah.
of the county and their investment in this project, because it is somewhat of an at-risk investment.
Chris?
Yep.
Going back to that whole continuum, looking at emergency shelter and then transition, and then ultimately a lot of people in permanent housing, whether it's supportive housing like you're proposing or homeownership opportunities, which I think there are a lot of opportunities to create new opportunities for new homeowners in this county. But regarding the permanent supportive housing, do we have a good sense of what the need is in this community for that kind of housing? Has any assessment been done? Because I assume that would have a dent also in like recidivism of homeless and repeat episodes of
Right.
homeless. And I just didn't know how big of a dent are we making with that, with those units.
It would be helpful. I think there's long wait lists for folks looking for housing, or substance use issues, and it's really difficult to move people from emergency housing into permanent housing. The supportive housing is really helpful because they need support to maintain, their rental status and to sort of navigate, and it also helps with the market rate, which is you can't pay the market rate for rent on a TA subsidy. So this is going to help, but I don't think anybody's ever, pinpointed the need, but it's greater than the number of opportunities that we're talking about.
So to Madam Chair's point, there's more discussions to be had about the housing needs.
So that's the next phase. Right? Yes.
Right, I mean, this could really be steps 1 and 2. Step 3 could be other rental houses, whether it's income restricted or market rate, and then ultimately.
Any other questions?
Next question.
Certainly.
Would this be for families and singles, or what are you anticipating the mix of?
I mean, I think we're gonna work with Chapel House and see what their biggest need is. I think it's primarily individuals, but we could look at a unit mix that does accommodate some families and some other units.
Chapel House is a good one, but also Auburn Housing Authority. I mean, they did put up brand new facilities. I mean, they've done a great job with rehabbing, a 50-year-old project over there. It looks brand new now,
Talking
and
about Home Village.
yeah,
the-
Home Village
And
and
then
will be
Maryland
housing.
House. Yep, that's more permanent housing.
Right.
Yep, that's their add to the permanent housing.
But didn't they shelter that just went up $10 million for housing?
Permanent housings for families, I thought, Tim.
There's some
They
transition.
transitional stuff too.
Yeah.
But no emergency and stuff. Not there.
So yes, the answer is yes, they did or they didn't.
Transition.
The Merriman project was done probably, what, five years ago now, or
And
or so.
transitional is,
That
time
includes a
limited.
mix of permanent and transitional, and I would say that was probably the last major investment in the homeless. We've seen. And I think that facility is functioning well, and it's a beautiful program they're running over there with the rescue mission. So if we do it right, I think we have good options.
And that focus was women and children. It was the-
Women and children.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess the next steps will be a potential proposal, or we'll have to figure out what the next steps are, but this is, when this was being talked about, I realized that a lot of, people in this room were not aware of this conversation, so the timing is right.
All right, very good. My contact information is in your packet, so if anyone wants to reach out.
Great, thank you.
We want to get on with the resolution. Yes.
There are, I don't know if you want to do appointments and updates, or if you want to go to resolutions, you let me know.
There are no appointments, right? And Brenda has her committee report here. She has no resolution, so I saw her earlier and told her, have a good evening. So if there's any other questions for her, then we can ask her individually. There's no updates for the health department at this point, and Ray's here. No further information. If there's questions, we could entertain them, but if not, we have a budget meeting after this. We can go through the resolutions tonight. HH1 is authorizing the chairman of the legislature and the public health director to renew a contract with Vineski and Company for auditing and consulting, primarily to audit their diagnostic and treatment center, which is a requirement to be done. I did get some additional information from the fiscal staff there that this is the contract renewal. They have been providing these services, I think, since 2009, at an annual cost of $7,500. So this renewal, which is a 3-year renewal, raises the annual rate from $8,000 to $8,500 a year. Motion for HH1.
Megan Johnson.
Any questions or concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
HH2 is authorizing the Director of Community Services to fill a caseworker vacancy in the Child Welfare Unit. This is a budgeted vacancy. Entertain a motion for HH2.
I'll move it. Strong.
Second, Heidi. Okay, great. Any questions? All right, all in favor? HH3 was added tonight, earlier this afternoon, I mean, and this is the resolution repealing the local law number 5 of 2014, establishing the positions of Commissioner of Social Services and Director of Community Service. There was also a revised local law that was attached that's going to be making its way through the meetings. The revision basically has adjusted the language in there in terms of in the future, if there was it really just changes the language around looking at having the DCS fill the clinic director position as well as the mental health director. And the language of in the future, if the county decides to do it different, that basic language had been removed. There was some concerns by the Community Services Board. So it's not the intent of the way we're going to be moving this forward. So the language has been removed and then local law was revised. The plan for this now is to go to a special ledge meeting on 11/18, where this resolution and local law will be presented, and then the public hearing to be set for December 1st. So I did have a conversation through text with Lori that the revisions had been made. I sent that to her as the chair of the Community Services Board, told her we needed to get this going because of the time frame and the notice, and so she's aware as well. go. Yep. Can I get a motion in a second and then we can have discussion?
Second.
All right. Any questions?
Madam Chair, I know that there's some new legislators that are going to be on board. Congratulations, Brian. District 12. Just a little rundown for the newbies. I'm no race here, and at one time we consolidated those departments.
Yep. In 2014, there was a decision by the county to consolidate the Director of Community Services and to also assume the role of DSS Commissioner. Legally, we have to have a DSS Commissioner and a DCS. Ray has fulfilled that responsibility. He's intending on retiring at the end of January. We have had multiple conversations. There was a recommendation that the departments both are big and complex, and it would make more sense to go ahead and separate those jobs. Have a DSS Commissioner overseeing the Department of Social Services and a Director of Community Services who fulfills the role of DCS under mental hygiene law and also operates the Cayuga County Mental Health Clinic. And if this law passes, because to combine them was set by local law, to uncombine them, the recommendation was to have another local law, and the local law requires a public hearing, an opportunity for the public to be heard. So if this moves forward and the public hearing is held on the 1st of December, then the legislature will vote, and if it's passed, then we'll be in the process of filling those two separate positions prior to Ray's retirement.
Now, that makes up a large portion of our budget. Is that not correct?
I think DSS was 28% of our budget years ago. I don't know what percentage of the budget it is now, but they're both big, large departments.
And
DSS
the local
being,
share is 21 million,
the local share for DSS is 21 million.
and the property tax levy is 42 million.
Well, there you go.
Big numbers.
Mhm.
Madam Chair.
Yep.
Not
Okay.
too much for any man or woman. Thanks, Ray, for doing that.
All in favor?
Oh,
Okay, great. HH4 is authorizing the chair and the director of community services to contract for supervising staff psychiatrists at the mental health center. This is Dr. Michael Pratt, I believe. He is agreeable to renew his contract, a 3-year agreement with the county to do the supervising psychiatric services at the mental health clinic. It maintains his hourly rate the same as it was. And we've gone ahead and budgeted the number of hours he's willing to work. So,
Also child psychiatrist, which is very,
yes, yeah, we're lucky to have the psychiatric staff that we have in our rural clinic for sure. All right, can I get a motion to renew the contract with Dr. Pratt?
Move it. Move it.
Okay, yep, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, great. And last but not least is to authorize the chair and the legislature and the director of the youth bureau to execute agreements with various agencies, and they're outlined in the resolution to provide youth development services. And my understanding is these are 2021 contracts. They have been faithfully being provided, the services have been provided. Lloyd tends not to bring the resolution until the actual allocation has been approved by the state. And it has been approved, and there will be the retroactive payments, but these are 2000 January to December 31st contracts. Oh, you're here. Hi. All right.
He's in person.
Yes, that is.
That's correct.
Okay. All right,
yeah, move it.
all right, second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, got a question?
I did have a question. I'm glad to hear it's 2021
Yes.
contracts, but I was curious about the process that we followed for awarding these funds. And I know we talked about that a little bit, Lloyd, that we got very flat funding on this for years. I hope to see that increase, whether it's through the state or some of this other money that's out there to bring in for more youth programming. And I was just curious with next year's allocation, have we started that process, or what does that look like? And what is the current status of our youth bureau board, if have those appointments been made, and is the board meeting?
So the process will be much different next year because I will not be a part of that process. And we're in discussions now about what that would look like.
Okay. All right. Is the board meeting, or is the board?
The 21s were renewals. They were a 3-year contract. So that was the 3rd year of the renewal. So next year, it can be done any way the county wants to do it.
Do you request an allocation, or they say, here's what Cayuga's is, work with it?
Oh, we would get it's based on our youth population from.
So you get an award.
You get an award, but then the county can RFP it and put out, the request for programming based on whatever needs have emerged over the year.
Not they get more than the number of youth and the formula they use. Is that?
We will not get it.
Will not. Okay.
But you may want to reallocate the way it's being used. These contracts are, these contracts are years old, and you may want to re-examine how it's being distributed to the agencies.
Things, I do think there's opportunity to leverage whatever the state gives us. Albeit, it's not a lot of money to work with, obviously. But I do think there's opportunity to leverage that, hopefully with some other dollars, and look forward to having conversations about that.
Absolutely.
Did we vote on that?
I believe Heidi moved it, and I believe Trish seconded.
Okay, and we're all good?
No one's
Favor?
voted yet.
Right, that passes.
Okay.
Anything else for? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Okay, second. All right. Thank you.
by that clock and my watch, 6:18 by that clock.
5:18.
6:18 by that clock, so you can take your choice. Now, the public hearing, it was not closed, I understand, from Health and Human Services. I don't think that's a big deal, but probably a good way to do it. Let's start with this. Is there anyone that wishes to speak regarding the public hearing? Is anyone called in? In that case, if it's good for stuff, let's begin by closing the public hearing.
Thank you.
And so the minutes reflect that. So this is the first of our Ways and Means Committee meetings to look at the budget. And the way we're doing it this year is maybe a little different than we've done in the past years, substantively the same. Tonight, we're going to talk about buildings and grounds, the Public Works Committee, buildings and grounds, highway, weights and measures. We're also going to talk about planning economic development, the committee, and then the stormwater conservation district. So the important thing, and this may be different, I just do not remember if it's worked this way in the past or not. But what I want to do is not make any motions to any resolutions, any motions to change the budget at these meetings. What I want to do is hold everything until the 18th. I've asked Max through Aileen to keep track of everything that comes up that's kind of said here that people wonder about in terms of, that we are questioning, maybe we should put more, that kind of thing in, so we don't lose track of anything. The reason I want to do it that way is what I don't want to do is at the people that come first say, well, we've got plenty of money. Let's do this. Let's put money there or whatever. And then discover come the 18th, when the people that are at the end of the line, they go, well, I'd like to do that, but we don't have any money. So we're going to consider everything on the 18th, which will give us theoretically the opportunity to establish priorities if that is necessary. This is a very solid budget. I don't anticipate there are going to be many changes, quite frankly. And so that's my anticipation, but we won't know that until there's a motion to adjourn on November 18th. So we'll see how that goes. So that's the process we're going to use. Excuse me. I sent a note to all of the department heads too. The other thing, and this has never really been an issue. I just wanted to make sure it was clear. One of the things I don't also want to do with this is provide an opportunity for people when they're talking about their budgets to talk about all the good work they do. Everyone does good work. And I think that we should all accept that. We should all know that at this point. What we're talking about is the 2022 budget. And if that budget has implications for the future, then that's an appropriate thing to talk about, those future implications. Otherwise, we're focusing on the 2022 budget. And that's kind of an important thing for me, so that our conversations focus and we move forward in a deliberate way. Having said that, I think what we're going to do, Lynn has organized some things that she's pulled out of the budget. I think probably most of these you talked about when you presented the budget. But the idea is we're going to go through the things, some things that changed in the budget. Then the department heads are here either in person or virtually. If there are issues that they want to bring up, will be their opportunity to do so. If there are issues that legislators want to bring up, this will be their opportunity to do so. And we'll take it kind of department by department. So is that good?
One clarifying question. You anticipate a meeting on the 18th is when Ways and Means will make potential changes, additions, whatever. And that will be the night that the Ways and Means budget gets to the rest of the legislature after the 18th meeting?
Yes.
Okay. So after that meeting, we should have a proposal to bring to the county legislature for our recommended Ways and Means budget, any changes to the tentative. Is that how
That's
it's going to work? Okay.
And importantly, we do not approve the budget itself. We will simply make changes, suggested changes by line, rather.
But there will be no motion to approve the budget and pass it along. The budget goes along anyway, with or without us. What we will do is suggest changes to particular lines on that budget. Very good. With that, let us begin with buildings and grounds. Lynn?
Okay, so the buildings and grounds budget does not have a lot of significant changes. One of the changes you may have noticed if you looked at the detail was that the salaries account has gone up a little bit. That was one of the changes was just putting 90% of buildings and grounds director in here and only 10% in parks. And before it was only 75% was in here and 25 was in parks. So that's just a moving between the two accounts. The part-time salaries is also up a little bit because of the positions that we've already created during the year. So if you've noticed that, it's not a new request in the budget for that. The contractual accounts were pretty stable, but we did include in the Hardenberg building, $400,000 for a new roof on that building. That was one of the items that was requested by Gary for the ARPA funds. So we decided to include that in the budget here. The county funds for that. We did remove the expenditures for the nursing home for the operations. There was still a little bit of money in there for that. So hopefully that will be completely transitioned to the hospital at that time. And that really is all of the noticeable changes that I have to kind of report to you. On that front.
Although, may I ask, isn't the roof on the public safety building?
That's in the public safety
That's in the
building
public
budget.
safety.
Yeah, that building's expenditures are budgeted in the public safety building accounts, but he does right. We did include some more roofs for that too, which we'll talk about. when we get there.
So are there any questions on that budget?
I know that we took some bids for engineering for this building. And I think they're back. I don't know the down cars here, but and that was just to see what kind of condition this building's in, what changes.
Those, are you talking about parks and,
Buildings.
The RFP for the building.
oh, you're talking
For
about,
the engineering
for this
report.
building.
to
Yes,
see-
yes.
that's a needs assessment? So it's not, we're not at the engineering phase. We're doing an overall needs assessment of all of our departments, who's in this building, who are in all the ancillary buildings, every county department, and then talking about how we could possibly restructure ourselves for space. They'll do spatial analysis, they'll do flow. They're gonna look at the cables, the air handling, the everything. And then
And
all the-
if I may, that's the 2021 budget.
Is it?
Yes. And so that money is in the 2021 budget, and that is going forward. That has no impact on this budget until this body decides to do something.
So I am going to come forward at the end of the month with a resolution to, for this body to decide about who we give the initial,
Yes, but if I may, Madam Chair,
Yeah.
it still is a 2021 budget.
It is,
I
yes.
really don't want to get off on, we'll be here forever.
well, it is important to know because when we do come forward with that, it will be out of this year's budget, not next year's.
Yes.
So that is
And
important.
it's also good to know there will be a presentation at the Ways and Means meeting, the regular meeting on the 18th, talking about fund balance that will be our Director of Finance will have a presentation to talk about potentially moving some money from our fund balance into the building reserve in anticipation of the additional costs. But none of that is in this budget at this point.
Mhm.
On the 18th, if we want to put some in, we can. Absolutely.
Just for the new people that are coming in, we do have lock boxers. We have locked up $4 million for those things in our budget now.
Yeah, I mean, it's more at like 3.5 or a little below 3.5.
That's
We've used during the year.
But yes, there are reserves, there are a number of reserves. And I would suggest that for the new legislators, that it makes sense to call our director of finance and arrange an opportunity to sit down and go over these kinds of things. Because you do need to know them. And that's the best way to do it. And perhaps we could ask her even to do a session, we schedule a session or two where legislators can come in and get that information, because it's good at that.
That would be a good recommendation.
So are there any other legislative comments, questions? So this is buildings and grounds. So Gary, do you have any questions or concerns or anything you want to bring to the attention of the committee?
The one concern that I do have, we really haven't talked anymore, at least I haven't heard any more about the issues that we brought up for the rescue fund projects. And some of those projects are not going to be covered by the rescue fund, will have to be covered at some point by the budget. I'm just throwing it out. The one thing we did take was the hardwood roof off that project and put it in the budget. That's the only one that came off there. So,
Very good, thank you.
Not the public safety roof too. See that came off too, public safety roof.
The public safety roof came off, yeah, that's not actually part of the buildings and grounds budget.
But it's
They have their own budget.
but
It is a buildings and grounds.
initiative, yes, okay.
Thank you. Ms. Larry?
Madam Chair, you had a great project at Emerson Park with the playground. Is that, where is that? And that's in 21, right?
That's in parks, and we will be talking about the parks budget if you want to hold that question.
All right, I just wanted to see where that project is.
Okay, great. So. So then highway?
Yes, the highway department is another one that really didn't have a lot of changes, no changes in staff. One of the changes though that we did do is we were able to increase the contribution from the A fund by $400,000 to get it back to $7 million that we're contributing instead of using part of the highway reserve. Last year we had budgeted that, use the reserve, but we put it back to how we normally do it. One change also is that we have included $1.2 million in equipment requests for the highway department, which is up $660,000. What Brian Soper has done differently is he has included $600,000 of CHIPS revenue in the DM fund to go directly into the fund to be able to buy that equipment. So that's one thing that we're doing a little bit differently. And he will monitor how much of the CHIPS money were awarded before he puts those purchases in. But besides that, there really is no significant changes in the highway department's budget that they submitted.
Thank you.
Then, the cost of fuel is going up. If we put that in that fund.
I think we've budgeted for the cost of fuel to be higher, but a lot of that actually is revenue to the highway funds, as far as departments using it. And, you know, a lot of our departments actually are probably using less gas, some of them during the year. So, yeah, I mean, that the amounts are higher, that you really would have to ask him if, you know, how he projected it out.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Rich, if you have anything?
Nope.
Sitting chair. Is Brian online?
I see he's
I
there.
see he's open. Brian, do you have any comments on your budget? I actually
Go ahead.
had that question on the fuel. I think that the question is, have you accounted for the potential increase in fuel costs in the budget?
Well, we've accounted for a potential increase, but who knows what the increase is going to be? So it's a little difficult to see into the future on that. But we have enough in there to cover.
Great. Good. Thank you. Any
We'll
other?
probably save a lot of money on the rock salt
purchase, so it'll be off
There's
balance.
not gonna be any snow this year, so don't worry about that.
Can we get that in writing?
I'm making that promise.
This isn't Camelot.
And you're driving, that's where it's all gonna go.
No, no. So, okay, anything that's going way too smoothly?
Do you
Well,
want
it's
to,
a good budget, so.
do you feel like, I'm sorry, to interrupt, that you want to announce the pages, if people want to take a look closely? I don't know if you're keeping track of the pages, just to tell them what section in. Yeah, that's okay, Max. Max, like, really, I don't know if anybody has anything, or if you've looked at it on your own already. So, just a thought.
Thank you. Okay, let's look at parks.
Okay, Parks had quite a bit more additional requests this year. They did request to add 2 part-time positions, which we included in the budget, and maintenance mechanic and cleaner. There is a estimated increase in salary for if we create the new Parks Director position. The equipment requests that are in there, it's up, it's about 143,000. This includes $40,000 for a boat slip road, $12,000 for a lawnmower, $4,000 for a golf cart, 12,000 for a light UTV, 15,000 for a medium UTV. We did remove $60,000 that was requested for a dump truck with a plow. And Aileen spoke to the highway department, and we're hoping that they could supply that to them instead. Finding a suitable vehicle that they could use instead of purchasing a brand new one. They have some requests in their professional services that's up in prior years. They have $10,000 in there for a rental dock relocation project, $5,000 for fireworks, $5,000 for camera sewer line, $20,000 for island sewer pit design, and $12,000 for the main sidewalk and lighting rehab design. Those are all several different accounts that are on the pages. Let me just tell you. Equipment requests is on page 128, and then if you look at pages 129 and 130, you'll see, if you just kind of scan the different columns, you'll see a couple of accounts that are up significantly. They also have an increase in their line called department expense, which is line 54075 or 74. It's up $50,000. We included $50,000 for programming new events at Emerson Park, such as concerts or any other items that they might be able to do. He also included additional funds for the Cato Buddhist Trail, $30,000 for establishing the trail, and another $12,000 for property transfer and survey. So those are all additional increases from the prior year.
Okay, so that there is a lot there. Legislators need a little more discussion on any of these things, or does everyone understand what we're doing?
Oh, just one question. I know that in the past, Gary, you've had a lot of help from the sheriff's department with some of the inmates to work on different things, and that's brought the budget down since COVID. You didn't have that available to you,
That's correct. That's why we've got part-time.
thinking that COVID's gonna continue and that you need some help.
Yeah, there's no end in sight right now that when the inmates will be able to come back. We could always not require them, the part-time people don't necessarily have to be on the schedule, they can be on call. And if the inmates all of a sudden they can come out. We call it out.
The cost of maintenance at the park is what? Or
Well, with all the buildings and grounds that are supposed to happen.
$500,000 to maintain our park. This is our labor.
Well, labor, that includes material.
Thank you. Thank you.
just was curious, I thought part of the reason to go part-time and not the seasonal stuff is we're having a difficult time getting people to take the position. This will be more predictable hours. You can actually hire someone and say, here's what your work schedule is gonna be, because it's tough to get people to come in when you call them, right? I mean, this will help address that.
The people that we would choose to come back as part-time are people that have come back to us year after year as season. And it would save us having to take them off, put them on, take them off, put them on, drug test them,
Right.
and so on. And then we could call them as needed, even like in January, February for snow removal, for example.
Yep.
And one of the examples is, the only person that I have in the CDL is one of these part-time building maintenance mechanics. That's the only person that could drive the truck that we were talking about. We want to get a small one-ton dump truck because anybody can drive that. But the big trucks are highway heads, you have to have a CDL. So we either have to train people to get a CDL, which we could do, or we need that other truck. So we can work through that. We're okay with this.
Yeah, and I think it's, you clarified for me, because my understanding was more what Elaine was saying than what you're saying now. I thought the plan was to hire part-time people for the year, part-time job, not as needed, but rather there would be 2 part-time positions.
Right. Yeah, that's correct. But in essence, they would be somewhat as needed because they're not going to be year-round the same number of hours. They're going to be working more hours in the summertime than they would. Like this time of year, we're finally getting away. We're still mowing, but we're going to be not mowing so much. And we're not doing plowing yet. So the building maintenance mechanic would be used for plowing and mowing later in the season, but not as much as we do during the summer. So they'd be almost full-time during the summer months.
Okay, got it.
And then scatter out. But you can schedule. See, that's the beauty of it.
But we're not gonna have to rely on recruiting seasonal people that have been just really problematic in recent years.
Yeah, we're anticipating some real trouble next year. We didn't get that many applicants this year. And we've done some projections that we're gonna sweeten the pot a little bit pay-wise. But I'm not sure how many we'll get even if we do sweeten the pot. I guess it really depends on what's going on with the economy.
Yeah.
But I haven't been able to fill those part-time labor positions that we did, even though I moved it to $15 an hour. Ben told me it was too low, he was right. I can't fill them, nobody's coming. One guy called me up and said he refused $20 an hour. I said, well, it's right on the thing, it's 15. Well, I thought the county could just help me out. I said, oh.
Well, then he had the opportunity to refuse 15 as well.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So everyone understands that. That's a different operational approach that we use that these guys came up with in order to try to solve that seasonal problem, which maybe will remain anyway, but still, this will be better.
Right.
And to be clear, the increase for the Parks Director position, that's coming before Public Works this month? I think, yeah, okay. So that money's in the budget, but of course, if that position is not approved, then that money won't be spent. So it's in the budget, but it's not a done deal. Be clear on that. Okay, any other? Everyone understands the programming, 50,000 for programming.
Want to give us a recap?
Well, Gary, to give a
Well,
recap.
You may recall that we had a consultant come in while we was funding and looked at the park and what we could do, what we should do, what we could do. And one of the things they recommended was more programming. So what this is an effort to put some funding in to allow us to actively go out and seek those programs, try to build up the programs at the park. That's the intent of this.
As part of the way to look at that, I think anyway, this is part of the larger capital project. We're ultimately, the goal is to spend about 10 million. Isn't that the number? $10 million in capital investment in that park to make it more attractive, to get more people there, to do more things. Well, someone's got to, those things don't happen themselves. Someone has to conceive, design, however they do, survey to identify what the programs are going to be to take advantage of those facilities. And so the two go together. even without expansion, with the capital project, that the idea of this is to bring people to the park. So it might be all kinds of stuff.
Right.
So that's the important position.
The other thing it is helping to address is, was mentioned last summer, was to say, let's go ahead and get a concert together. When we were lacking, going back to the EMS conversation, why we couldn't have the July 3rd fireworks, had to do with EMS. But we were talking about, what about a concert? Why can't we just do it? So we don't need to wait until it's totally built up. We can start to do things now.
Right.
So that is an effort to, and that was recommended in this room,
Yeah.
to kind of help them get that off the ground. They couldn't do that with the budget they had. So.
Or the other thing, that's been mentioned, Steve Lynch first brought up the idea, and it's been mentioned at public food truck rodeos. That could be done anytime,
Yes.
but who's going to do it? Well, that's one of the things that this person may or may not do. I'm not suggesting that the person will, but it's the idea. There are lots of things that can be done. To make the park attractive, therefore to generate directly or indirectly revenue for the county, as well as making it part of the destination. So the reason I'm making such a big deal about this is exactly the kind of thing that's a body, historically, what we've done when it's come forward, is we've said, what's that for? And this is what it's for, and this is the opportunity to kind of be on the same page, I think, in terms of the needs. Opportunity, if you've got questions, ask them now.
For many years, people, we've all heard people in Auburn saying there's nothing going on in the park, nothing going on in the park. I think the legislature and Doug Delastrado, to his credit, and planning department, with the grant that they got for us to help develop the park, we're finally on the right trajectory for the park. And it really could make a difference. And Doug is on it if you have any questions for him, or if you want to call on him to speak up on this at all.
Yeah. Well, does anyone have any questions about that?
Just that the park was the attraction in central New York once upon a time when we had the rides up there.
I remember.
Hopefully,
And you remember.
yeah, I did a little ski ball, but we can have that again, it'll be an attraction.
I think so. That's the direction we want to have.
So before I give Doug an opportunity to weigh in here on anything he wants to, any legislators have any other questions or comments? Chris?
I see there's funds budgeted from parking, in your budget, it looks like, Gary.
The same amount, yeah.
And I was just curious, what conversations have been had around that as we're looking to add programming and other revenue streams to the park? Is the commission having conversations, or is that something that you're still looking at regarding the parking fees? I know we waived them during COVID. It looks like we're planning to charge next year.
As it stands right now, yes. I wouldn't, I'd like to, sorry, you guys have Doug weigh in on that. He's a financial person. I was supposed to have them online if you need them.
So Doug, you can hear the question?
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, the question was about like, how are we planning on doing the charging for parking and how does that impact the numbers for next year? Is that correct, Trish?
Yeah, and just, I guess, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and also, I think that has the commission been talking about whether to continue or reinstate parking next year, or continue to have it free? I think that's the other issue, right? Because the commission recommends to us, the legislature, but it comes from the commission as a recommendation. So
Yeah, I was
where are
curious.
we with it?
Correct. The last 2 years, the decisions were obviously put into place due to the impacts of the pandemic. And in the effort to make the park as accessible as possible, that's how basically those decisions came to. But it happened during 2020. It happened, in March or April of that year. Last year, we had the subsequent conversation in January and February. Because we had the conversation into the calendar year, we obviously budgeted the revenue as we were going to charge, and then the legislature made the call after the Parks Commission made a recommendation that we could probably extend it for another year because of the ongoing impacts of the pandemic. We haven't had a discussion in the Parks Commission about it in the effort to keep the numbers kind of year to year comparable. We've gone forward and we're happy to have that conversation again in January and February. But at this point, we were maybe hopeful that we would be operating normally, if you will, in the next calendar year.
Tim?
Doug, would you just, we have a lot of new people in the room that are coming on board. Would you just, I mean, the maintenance on the park is kind of high, and we used to generate money from the pavilion with some of our vendors that were operating the thing, and we used to make money from parking, and that used to go for replacing the roofs and that.
Excuse me, that's an important distinction. The money from parking was to go to maintain the park. It was not to maintain the buildings or anything else. And that's a big distinction, so.
I'm just saying that the vendor who has the contract with the pavilion, you make so much, or we get so much money to go into a lockbox to maintain that building. Is that correct? Just for the newbies?
For the rental for the pavilion, as we currently have it set up, for example, this year's rent due was $90,000. How the contract reads is 45,000 of it is regular revenue for the county, goes into the general fund. And the balance of $45,000 goes into replacement, repair account, or reserve, if you will, specifically for that building. As for the parking, I believe it was maybe 2018 or prior to that. Gary can correct my date, but at that point, for the parking revenue in excess of $67,000 goes into a park reserve for park repairs. Up until that point, that $67,000 goes into the general fund. Like I said, I might not have the year correct, and Gary can correct that.
That's probably right. It's right around 2018.
Yep.
Thank you. Ms. Foley?
If I could just want to request if we could try to limit questions to the 2022 budget. If we trying to get new individuals, legislators up to speed is important, but we will be here all night long pointing out every single nuance if that's the case. So try to, maybe keep on what we're doing with that's in front of us. Thank you.
Okay.
Great point, Mrs. Foley.
I guess not to kill this, but the takeaway is they budgeted for parking fees like they were going to be charging fees to park there January 1st on.
That's a
That's
takeaway.
the takeaway.
Yeah, if people wanted to have that discussion, well, we can have that discussion here. We can have it ways on the 18th. We can have it, the budget, or we can have it. The legislature can have it later when the Parks Commission comes forward with a recommendation that they do. So yeah, but that's exactly right. Thank you. Anything, Doug? Do you have anything to add to the budget, 2022 budget? Any concerns or comments or observations? Did you want to?
No.
To save money?
No, I think that it would be great if we could work with the highway department to kind of deal with some of our trucking, plowing issues with them. Obviously, we'll work through, if, like Gary said, if we have to work through the CDL licensing, things like that, if that makes it more efficient, that's great. We obviously work with them extensively and always appreciate their help. And then going forward, just as you mentioned, I mean, the programming funding that's in there has a couple of earmarks in my mind, and as far as what the programming consultants really generated, and you've mentioned all of them, it's the fact that if we did a concert series, there are always rental and equipment costs with those. if we work with another organization, for example, we've been trying to, since the beginning of the pandemic, work with some programming with the YMCA. There may be equipment costs and things in there. And then the food truck rodeos and events that associate with those, they're all very important. And they take seed money that we would then go out and pair local organizations with. Many of them have come to us and said, we were interested in partnering with you. So this would give us a huge step forward at really achieving some of that programming plan that was planning that was completed back in 2019 now.
Thank you. Are we ready to move on? So I don't even think we need to talk about weights and measures. Weights and measures is weights and measures. There's not much money there. It's the salaries, paper clips, a little bit of gas. There's no new equipment, right, this year? There's no new.
No.
So,
No.
anyone have any questions about weights and measures? However. Great. So let's move on to planning and economic development. Wait. Oh, yeah, did you have an ag museum question? Sorry.
I did. I was wondering with the programming funding, if any of that would be used at the Ag Museum to support programming there.
Yeah, that's a good point. The Ag Museum does have an increase, and thank you for bringing that up. It does have an increase in the part-time line, and that would be used for in theory, for response to additional programming. I would think anyway. Is that right, Doug?
Yes, it could be. It could. I mean, the programming money could also be used in support of the Sterling Nature Center.
That answer? Yeah, thank you for that. I just. Okay, planning.
Okay, planning, not a lot of changes here. You will see the revenue has gone up some. That is mainly from budgeting a grant revenue, but we also have the expense also budgeted $18,000. Besides that, no big changes in the revenues there for the planning department. Salaries have gone up some. I do think that we only budgeted for a position for part of the year last year. And it got filled, so now we have the whole year of the position, so you might just notice that change, but there's not a different change in there besides that. And that was really the only significant change I saw. Otherwise, it's a pretty flat budget compared to 2021.
It's called Planning and Economic Development, and I'd like to see us, I know Madam Chairman wanted to put more money into CETA. I mean, there is a mountain of money that's coming down from the federal government with economic development. And I want to make sure that, as I've said for years and years and years, we don't have a grant writer, we don't have this or that. And I think it would behoove us. I know that there's been some projects that have been developed over the 6 years. I know there's been some stumbling blocks, but now that the money has arrived in Washington and it's going to flow to the state, I hope that we can put a major project together in the coming years. And I want to make sure our planning staff and economic development has enough funding to do whatever CETA can't do or won't do or whatever. But somehow there's got to be some coordination there. And it's a once in a lifetime opportunity for us
to
put Cayuga County on the map.
Well, I haven't seen the detail on the infrastructure bill. I just seen
Tons of money.
Yeah, but the tons I've seen are for literally infrastructure, not economic development, except, broadband, the roads, now the other bill does have lots of things that are more directly economic development, but that hasn't passed. And
There's enough to remake Cayuga County. And I want to make sure we have the personnel in place.
So we'll
to handle it.
work on that between now and the 18th. If you have a proposal, that's exactly what we will, this is what we're doing here. We're throwing out ideas, we're talking about stuff. And then on the 18th, we'll entertain resolutions to make some of these ideas reality. So that's, that's the direction we're going.
Well, I mean, I think Madam Chair's suggestion in regards to beefing up economic development.
Yeah, no,
But where,
I'm not questioning your thing. I'm just saying we got it. The next step is to make it practical in terms of I move that we take X number of dollars, and whatever, which is what we do on the 18th. So the other, I have a question, and that's I noticed on the planning agenda this month, there's an administrative assistant position. Why did that not go through the budget?
It didn't go through budget because it was in flux as to where it was going to be placed at the time. There was some conversations about putting it in the finance department, and then it was pulled from that. And after the budget was already put together, it was a decision to streamline the mechanism and keep it in planning. And that's reimbursed by CCDC, as I think you and I sort of generally discussed.
Okay.
But that's why it's not in the budget.
Yeah, okay, well, the thing with, we'll talk about that in planning in more details, not to take time here, but just in general, my thinking is that's a new position and it needs to be considered not in planning, but in Ways and Means on the 18th. It's a position, and no one else, everyone else has been asked not to do positions until we get the budget in place. So we'll see what the planning, because it came through in planning, we'll see what they say. But thank you, I do understand that. Good point. Okay, are there any other questions on?
I have a question.
Yep, sorry.
No problem. I know we've had some discussions about Capusa and potential staffing. I was wondering, where in the budget would that be considered?
It's probably the Ways and Means budget itself, so on the 18th.
It's kind of a legislative
In the budget
It's a legislative
contract
thing.
is where it is, Trish. It's in the budget beginning of the budget.
Oh, okay, legislative contract.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll tell you what page it's in.
So Max has written this down.
Four.
See, look at that.
Great.
If he's anything like me later, he'll go, I can't read that. No, he's not like me. He is.
On page 5, you can see.
Yeah, like-
Count A 10144 54505. That's where we have budgeted the contract.
Oh, I see. Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
So any questions on plan economic development other than what we got? Steve, did you have anything to add?
I don't have anything to add at this point.
Okay, great, thanks. And we point out that the employment and training is pretty much a pass through. There's no changes there, and if they are, they have to, I mean, they do impact our budget because we have little to no local contribution to that. And that's true of tourism as well. Tourism is pretty much a pass through, room taxes collected. It goes to the Q County Bureau of Tourism. That's not right. It's not Bureau of Tourism. Office of Tourism. And they expand it. If the revenue is less than we anticipate, then their budget gets cut. If it's more than anticipated, we got
You still give it to them.
exactly.
The treasurer keeps 5% out of the collections.
So that budget is really has nothing to do with it. Okay, great. So soil and water.
The budget was increased, in 2021, they had an allocation of $675,000. Hit the budget at $700,000, and their request was $775,000.
So that was a $25,000 increase. But their request had been $100,000.
Yeah.
So questions before Doug has an opportunity to speak, or the questions on the soil and water budget? And again, I would emphasize, this does not include the recovery funds. Soil and water has a number of requests that will, in my view, will move the county forward in terms of clean water and set us up to maybe mitigate some of the flood damage we've had. That's extra budget stuff.
No, Doug is probably answered 90% of my.
Oh, okay. So Doug, do you want to have any comments on your budget?
I just appreciate the consideration for the appropriation. Obviously, that's the staple of our program and
The 25,000 increase, you appreciate that.
I appreciate it.
Oh, and by the way, there's another part of that. Attaboy. We forgot that.
Busy year.
But Mark, did you have a comment or question?
And I don't want to take away from the 18th. That's where, but yeah, I had the opportunity to work with Doug and his staff way a lot more than I anticipated.
Yeah.
The last couple of weeks with the flood damage. I would just like to, have everybody give the consideration of their, the original request of the 775. And, I would just, ask everybody to think about that, and we'll definitely get into the nuts and bolts of it on 18th.
Yeah, but based upon that, so Doug, what'd you want the extra 100,000?
Yeah.
What was that for?
So similar to Tim's point about the infrastructure, bill, there's a lot of funding out there right now to protect water quality, both federal and state level. And with the storm damage and everything else that we've been pulled into this year, we're already maxed out. There's a lot of stuff we just leave right on the table. Similar to the discussions earlier about the costs going up, we're a Sterling to Lock organization. We travel the county, we're a field group, and we put miles on our vehicles, and the cost of gas going up, cost of health insurance goes up. The budget that the budget amount we're at right now is similar to the number we were at in 2007. So costs since then have definitely gone up. So we're just trying to recoup some of the costs, yet also try to bring some additional resources and assistance to the residents of the county.
Can I ask a question? You don't have a local share contribution, do you? I mean, you're able to have the fringes that you're supporting with this $725,000. I mean, is that fair to say? It's like, were you hoping to add additional staff? I mean, are you covering your costs of personnel right now?
The county appropriation that we receive right now is 20% of our budget. And so we take that 20% and have to go out
And
and
in,
get the rest of our budget. So the
in grants or those kind of things?
exactly, through grants and everything. So could I add somebody? I would love to add. another
But
staff.
is that what your request was for?
Just to cover some of the costs. Yeah, we're down a couple staff. 4.
I'm still confused. Were you hoping to add additional staff to the operation? That's where you were getting this 100,000 request? That's what I'm not clear on.
For a project, or is it?
It's not for a project. The funding that the county gives us is only for staff. And it
It's for
covers
staff.
and benefits. We take any of the vehicles we have, equipment we own, any of the work that we do out in the field implementation wise, protect water quality, all of that is from outside. So
But that's where ARPA could come in as well for those non-recurring replacements and those kind of things, whether, is that true?
yeah, we put in a request for 8 different projects.
So if some of those got funded through the American Rescue Plan, you would be on your way to having a better budget? Is that?
Yeah, no doubt, any funding that comes to our office helps out.
But I think that the question that Elaine's asking is, are you if you get 25,000 more, which is going to cover some of the increase in cost, now it's in that. The other 75,000, was that to hire a staff person, or was that simply to cover more of the costs additional costs you've incurred since the last big increase?
I would
No, that's not my question. You have a budget. What's the budget for? You can't say if. You know, if you got the extra money, what would your budget look like? Would it be another person? Would people get raises? Would they, I think that's the question.
I think people do definitely deserve a raise, so some of it would go towards the costs associated with the increases. It would go towards the costs associated with travel expenses,
Okay.
existing healthcare costs that went up 5% or 6%.
Well, what I would suggest is because Mark's, I'm interested in this. If you guys can work together so that on the 18th, what you can bring is something that says, here's what the additional money is going to be used for. Here's why it's necessary. Because otherwise, it's difficult to know. Everyone would like more money. And everyone has a use for it. And I mean that sincerely. I don't think that anyone that in the county department or anyone that we serve, that, you know, our partner agencies, I don't think any of them are wasting money.
Because if
But
we're, if
that
we're
would
on the
help
same
to look at-
page, we were talking about not using the American Rescue Funds for reoccurring costs year after year. So that's what I was trying to get at, is that what this would have been for? Or is there other monies that could come through that could, I mean, you have a lot of requests in that are, okay.
You did.
Yeah.
You did receive this email from Doug directly. where
The
he-
request from the ARPA funds.
Yeah, this went to all legislators.
Yes, we got that, but
Right.
that's,
Well, not ARPA, this is the budget request. This came to you with his ask.
oh, I
the
thought that was
additional
all ARPA.
And then the backside, it was 775. Yeah, so this is where we talk about, this is what I mentioned
Oh,
during the
yeah.
presentation, increase
I
in
don't,
health insurance.
I don't think we got that, Amy. I didn't.
It's addressed to all Cayuga County legislature.
Well, I believe we got it. I missed it.
October
I usually
22nd.
don't miss emails, but I missed that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he didn't.
No,
I
So
listened
Doug
to it.
did
I
his
was-
work.
I'm pretty good at.
He did send it to
my email.
everyone, yeah.
I'll be glad to work with,
When was it?
Well, you don't
October?
have to, if it's all there.
October what? Was it?
I
October
spoke to Doug the other
22nd?
day. He just forwarded me another.
I was on it.
another
That,
copy of
check
that.
my email, Doug.
And I will,
it was,
Doug and I will work together for the 18th.
Sounds great.
and it was all very complete information to explain. So, good job.
Mr. Lattimore.
Douglas, I'd love to give you more money. I mean, Owasco Flats was holding time for storm like damages, and I know that Mr. Strong and I were up on the east side of the lake on part of the steep watershed, and I know on the opposite side of the lake, on the west side, there was also storm damage. And somewhere we've got to, on our tributaries, put in some holding ponds. I don't know where that money would come from. I mean, this pile of money that's in Washington, I hope maybe somebody can review that and see whether or not we could, Vanessa Brook, Dutch Hollow, and other brooks that are carrying a lot of material to the lake, which is adding to the vegetation growth. Stop. So I'd like to see it look and see whether or not what you need in order to chase that.
Well, that's not the 2022 budget, and we will not be considering those kinds of projects at that. Those are, that we will consider those with the ARPA funds. But we're not going to, we are not going to consider brand new projects for this budget. Just makes no sense, because that was the budget process. People went through the budget process. This is what we need. This is this stuff. It was negotiated. It was paid. Now is our opportunity, though, appropriately, to say we cut something by mistake because it makes sense to put this back in, but it does not make sense to revisit.
No, I'm saying if he needs more personnel in his office to chase that pile of money in
I
Washington.
understand that's what you're saying. I'm saying we are not going to visit that in Ways and Means for the budget. It's a good idea, and if the new legislature wants to consider that, that's fine. But we're not going to do that in this budget because I don't want to say to every department head, if you have other ideas, please bring them forward. That's the budget process is submit your budget. It's discussed. There's a budget is proposed, and then we go and we say, how do we tweak this? So, yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, so, Trish, you have a Question?
I guess just a question and a comment, as I'm the legislative representative on the Soil and Water Conservation District Board. And I've worked with Doug for many, many years. And I just was wanting to make sure, in terms of your budget request with the $100,000 request, I definitely think that there's a capacity issue with soil and water in terms of our ability to maximize the benefits that we get from our relationship with you. One of the things that I guess I just ask you to comment on, Doug, is the work that Soil and Water does in partnership with highway or local municipalities or parks and trails.
Actually, Trish, may I stop you there? Because that gets what I was talking about. Everyone does good work. They do good work. They do great work. But that's not, I don't want to revisit that. 'Cause
Well, it's a budget question specifically. I mean, I guess I'm just asking about the budget savings that we can realize having a fully staffed soil and water. For instance, with Scott Gulf Road, that level of coordination with our own highway department, I believe, saved the county significant amount of money overall. And I just wanted to make that point and maybe have a comment on it from a budget standpoint.
Good work. Yeah. So is that have an impact on the 2022 budget? Let's look at the 75,000 and then see what that was. That was the proposal, and see what that is. Because as I say, I apologize, I missed it. So we'll take that up. And that may once we see it 75, maybe that plays into this. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it just reminds, because, you know, we didn't do a whole lot of in-depth work last year. So some people who've been here for a couple of years hasn't really played this part, but that's an opportunity for Mark or Trish or whomever to come on the 18th. And you have to say what you're going to do and where the money's going to come from. So you have to do that work between now and the 18th and come prepared. And that's the point. So if you've got ideas or you're getting ideas as you sit here, and then off on your own or whatever in the next couple of weeks is where you're gonna kind of pound that out and find out, you know, the exact, and then you present that to the rest of us and then we either up or down.
And you don't have to be a member of the committee to present ideas,
Right.
by the way. You can't make a motion if you're not Ways and Means, right? But you certainly can present information. I think we have to do this. And then, of course, when it goes to the floor, the full legislature, there's another opportunity for any legislator at that point can make a motion to change any given line or the total budget anyway. So there's several opportunities between now and the final approval. Mr. Vitale.
Yeah, I'd like to just make one comment. I mean, there's ideas that are floating around and everything, and I just want to point out in the 2022 budget, there's an additional $100,000 in the contingency account. Normally we budget 100,000. This budget has 200,000 budget, and that also gives the new legislature in 2022 great opportunity to make some changes to the budget. So it was very thoughtful to include that opportunity. And I think people should also look at that as a way to enhance certain parts of the budget next year as they see fit.
Yeah, it's a good observation. Thank you. Ms. Lattimore.
Doug, the formula, when we give you $1, does it multiply with your department like it does with Cornell Cooperative Extension?
We go after it. That's where the county budget, county appropriation receives 20%.
So you can multiply whatever we give.
Well, it's not like cooperative extension. Cooperative extension, if we give them $1, they get whatever it is. Do you know offhand, Ben?
No, I don't.
I don't.
There's
If
a
we give them
formula that
$1, they
uses.
get 50 cents from Cornell or $1.50 from Cornell. That's a formula.
Yeah.
With soil and water, if we give them money, they use that money to get it to get grants, and that multiplies the most of that money doesn't go to so water. Most of that money goes to projects. And so the projects get done. But there is no multiplier the way there is with Cornell Cooperative Extension. They do though what you were just saying before, and that is pursue grants. They pursue external money in order to get things done within our county.
Thank you for that clarification.
So are there any other questions or issues? Okay, so our next budget meeting is Tuesday, the 16th, and that follows our regular Ways and Means meeting. And I will be asking people on the Ways and Means Committee not to give oral reports unless there's something you just have to say, so that we maximize the time on the budget. That will be Tuesday, November 16th, following Ways and Means. With that, if there's no other business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn. Second. Come on, who's gonna second? So we're adjourned.